as I said before the break here, we're excited to get into baseball. We're going to be going heavy into it this week. It doesn't sneak up to you, Brandon, because you cover it all season pretty much and do a great job at it. But I think for the average fan that watches a lot of sports, not that you don't watch other sports, but football ends and then it's like, wait a minute, already with the baseball? We've already had a game. I kind of, when I prepared for this interview, I kind of lost track of when they even began spring training, partially because of the coverage issues. I don't know where to go to find this, so I just go to Bless You Boys and read about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an awkward situation right now because no one's exactly sure how we're going to be watching it this year. The Tigers are supposed to put out something this week with the details on how to buy streaming packages and how they're going to license this through cable and all that. So we should have a better idea. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure for a lot of people, it's barely, really registering that it's even going on. Whereas for someone like myself, we're already 3 games in, and I'm like, oh Lord, can't the regular season get here? It always feels, first couple games you're real excited for, and then most of it isn't even on TV, and it's kind of dragging, and no one's playing that well. The starters aren't playing that much, so it doesn't even really heat up for another week or two. And so, it makes for kind of it's always awkward this time of year because we get real excited for spring training to start. And then after a couple of days, we're like, okay, well, here we are. So, there hasn't been a whole lot to report, We saw Scooble today, and he looked very Tark Scooble-like, so that's good to see. And, we've seen a few of the other pitchers, but for the most part, we haven't seen Verlander on the mound yet. We saw Flaherty briefly yesterday. I don't think we've seen Kenley Jansen yet. So, it's been a little bit of watching the top prospects. Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark have had some good swings so far. But for the most part, the Tigers haven't really done much at the plate, and the games have been somewhat dull.
Well, I get what you mean with saying there's not much to report, but I'm glad you're talking about all these new names and fresh faces because we really haven't covered baseball yet. This is kind of our introductory one for the season. We've kind of mentioned things here and there as far as when they'll pick up a free agent, but we really haven't covered them since they clearly got more aggressive. I mean, we did have a segment with Emily Walden, who's a friend of the show, and we talked about the Fall League when she was out there. And be sure to follow her and follow her journey. I think my shirt is en route for her battle here. But we've talked about some of the young guys, and obviously we follow them because of West Michigan here, because we saw McGonigal and Clark and the group go through here. But it's an interesting combination because some of those guys, they're just going to be getting loose in spring training. The Verlanders and the Scoobles and the Jansens of the world, they're going to be mainly focused on the longevity of the season being on the older side, especially the last two. But it's fun to see the first shot at these young guys at the major league level because I'm curious about your take. I know we haven't seen much of them, but just your impression of McGonigal as a whole, because you also cover the prospect side of things. I'm not sure how long he has in the minor leagues before being pulled up to the majors. I know people are saying, well, he could, he's young, he could use some more seasoning, but with how disciplined of a hitter he is already and the fact that he could fill a pretty large need, I think that's maybe part of the reason they're not being as aggressive as they could be with the left side of that infield, knowing, hey, he's coming. Maybe we don't know quite when, maybe they do, but he's coming. And if he has a good spring training, that might mean he's coming sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's an element of A.J. Hinch, being very happy to challenge Kevin McGonigal. And Max Clark is a little bit further behind, but I'd expect we'll see Max Clark sometime this year. And that might depend, to some degree on how well Parker Meadows does and whether Parker Meadows, can kind of get it together at the plate. But McGonigal could probably hit in the major leagues, like from the jump. He's that good a pure hitter. He doesn't strike out. He takes his walks, but he's actually a really pretty aggressive swinger in the zone. He hits a lot of fly balls to right field. He's got above average to plus power. This is the best hitter the Tigers have ever had in the minor leagues. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that. Maybe you could go back to Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell in the 70s. But as far as being that polished, Kevin McGonigal is that guy. And really the question and the thing to watch this spring is his defense at shortstop. His arm is a little bit lacking. Otherwise, he's a pretty good shortstop who is, still only 21 years old. I don't even know if he has 200 professional games under his belt yet as a shortstop. So he's still working on all those things. He spent, actually, to mention Alan Trammell, he spent, parts of the off season and in the Arizona Fall League working with Trammell. I'm sure Emily, shout out to Emily Walden, probably mentioned that. So he's working really hard on that, that element of his game. And if he plays, passable shortstop, I think that definitely increases his chances of getting the call, because obviously that's, kind of the position of weakness on the Tigers roster right now. They can use Zach McKinstry, they can use Javi Baez there, but neither one of them necessarily profiles as playing there every day. So yeah, I think the ball is in, Kevin McGonigal's hands to a degree, as far as, if he has a huge camp, then he's going to earn that consideration. To tell you the truth, though, it may come down to, something more like, is he willing to sign a team-friendly long-term extension? When Colt Keith signed his 2 years ago, that got him to the major leagues on opening day. It might be a similar kind of situation where the Tigers don't necessarily want to start Kevin McGonigal's service time clock until they're 100% sure that he's going to hit the ground running, and not just be a solid hitter, but to be the above average to, potentially all-star caliber hitter that we all know, anyone who watches the minor leagues will tell you he can be. So, yeah, he's definitely going to be a key attraction this spring. And obviously, the Tigers, didn't do a whole lot, like, for a long time this spring. It was basically like giving Gleyber Torres the qualifying offer, which he decided to come back on. Jack Flaherty decided to opt in. We signed Drew Anderson, who is a pitcher coming back from Korea, who pitched over there, who was with the Tigers in 24, but not a notable name, just kind of a depth guy. And then, they signed Kenley Jansen and Kyle Finnegan to bulk up the bullpen, and we like that. But then nothing really happened all through, January, and, the voices were getting pretty loud in the fan base. People were pretty frustrated that they weren't going to get a bat, that they weren't adding another pitcher. And then, on, back-to-back days, we get Framber Valdez here on, the biggest annual salary contract that the Tigers have ever given out. It's only a 2-year deal with a 3rd-year option, but they paid him a lot, per year to come here, and that's a huge get for the the starting rotation. Much more dependable than Olsen, much better than Reese Olsen. But of course, as we found out, they signed Justin Verlander as well. We were all excited about that, but in that, you kind of realized, okay, something is probably wrong with Reese Olsen, because they don't need 6 starting pitchers right off the gate like that. So, yeah, they lost Olsen. They added Valdez and Verlander, and that's, maybe 2 to 3 wins better. And so, yeah, and they finally spent some money, too. And I'm sure, Chris Ilitch and the Ilitch Family Trust is feeling a little bit less heat from the fan base as a result that they finally kind of opened the purse strings a little bit and are spending pretty good coin at this point.
Exactly. It did seem like they reinforced some of the possible cracks in this team, because, like you said, the Olsen thing, they obviously had wind of that, and then that's why they got Verlander into the mix. But, you could have argued, okay, well, there were maybe some guys that could have filled that spot. That's kind of what they went with last year when Olsen got hurt. They didn't get too aggressive at the deadline. That was one of the criticisms last year. They could have been more aggressive. They could have added a starter. When they added Morton, I kind of thought, okay, was this a decision? Did they have a similar level of aggression in trying to get Verlander last year at the break, and maybe they didn't bring him in? Maybe they were worried about locker room fit or where he would fit kind of moving forward or what have you. But they went with Morton, who was maybe the easier fit in general, but you didn't know what his kind of highest potential was at that point, given his age and production last season and as that approached. So there was a lack of aggression there, but now it seems like they're getting a little bit more aggressive. That's why I kind of focused on the McGonigal thing, because that's the only place that they haven't been aggressive where you could see the lack of kind of a reinforcing piece. Whereas, but most other places, the bullpen, okay, that faltered a little bit down the stretch. They reinforced that by re-signing the piece they added at the deadline that did pretty well in Finnegan, and then they get Jansen in the mix. Now they went from 1.5 closers to 3, 2.5, whatever you want to say. We'll see where everybody slots in, and I'm sure it'll be a bit of a jumble there. That the rotation is very strong, and then now that gives them a lot of flexibility, because obviously there's a lot of game between the starters and the back end, but they have a lot of arms that they can kind of manipulate through those various innings depending on how many they're dealing with, which is obviously what Fetter and Hinch like to do.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a bullpen, probably, I think, pretty packed with guys who are very comfortable going 2 to 3 innings. The addition of, Valdez for Olsen obviously is good in terms of just quality of pitcher, but then adding Verlander on there too might end up pushing Troy Melton and Kader Montero and Drew Anderson all into the bullpen. And all three of those guys can start. There's certainly plenty of opinion out there that Troy Melton, is a starter and should get those looks this year. But, injuries have a way of sorting those things out. So, yeah, I mean, I think the addition of Verlander also makes the bullpen better by allowing you to put those guys in there. You can use them a little more flexibly. You don't need, 1-inning guys necessarily. And then you can just save Will Vest, Kenley Jansen and Kyle Finnegan for the late high leverage situations without having to really lean on them too much. So I think, all around it makes the pitching staff, better all the way through and a lot deeper. So yeah, the pitching questions are not too prevalent right now. Knock on wood. Hopefully things go well this spring. But yeah, that forces the question back to the offense because, for the first half last year, the Tigers offense was one of the best in the game. Riley Green looked like he was going to hit 40 plus home runs. And then, they absolutely blew a tire, from the All-Star break on. So, yeah, it's a little awkward that they didn't go and get a bat. I was 100% all in on Alex Bregman last year as the perfect fit for this team. That didn't happen, and they didn't really seem to pursue him or really any other, top-shelf hitter this offseason. So, yeah, I mean, it's the additions are going to have to come from the farm system, and unlike last year where we had Job, we saw Jackson Jobe in 2024, but last year was his rookie season, basically, and we knew Troy Melton was coming, but that was really it from the farm system. And now you look at it, and you've got McGonigal, who's, almost ready, if not ready. You've got Max Clark, who should be ready sometime later this summer. You've got Josue Briseño, who's a power-hitting first baseman who doesn't strike out much, can catch for you, possibly. So, yeah, they've got some bats coming, and they're going to have to depend on that a little bit. Because, yeah, I mean, I don't know where the extra offense is going to come from necessarily this year. Colt Keith is still only 24, hit a ton of homers in the minors, and hasn't really quite figured out the power side of things in Major League Baseball yet, but has put up, modestly above average numbers the last few years. So, maybe this is the year he breaks out a little bit more. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, you are kind of looking at the same offense with a much reinforced pitching staff. And then it's just a question of the timetable for McGonigal to get here. Because when Kevin McGonigal gets here, I'm very confident he's going to rake. And it's just a question of how long, it takes for him to figure it out to the point where he's hitting 25, 30 homers a year for you. Might not happen right away. But that's the strength of this team, is that the farm system is going to produce some real good talent this year. And maybe by the end of the season, this offense looks way better than it does right now. No guarantees, but that's the plan.
It does seem like it's a good match between a potential hole on the major league roster and a guy that's getting to the point where it's like, okay, how much more does he need to do in the minor leagues? I know he hasn't been there that long, but as far as just pure performance, he does seem like he's approaching being ready. And kind of similarly for Clark, I know he's not on the same trajectory, but you've got a similar situation kind of at the major league level. So I want to come back and talk about that and talk about kind of those solutions to the potential holes at the major league level on the offensive side, both in the reinforcements coming from the minor league and a potential combination of assets from potentially the minor leagues and acquiring a major league asset there. So we'll come back with Brandon Day of Bless You Boys. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Brandon Day of Bless You Boys, having a good conversation about the Tigers, kind of doing a season introduction and preview. And Brandon, I know we left off kind of at the hitting side of things. That'll be the remaining question because, as you know, as somebody that's been on the beat for a while and covers them, the fans tend to gravitate towards, you addressed the pitching side. Well, now what about the hitting? But I do think that between some of those names that we've been talking about, the reinforcements that you do feel like are going to be ready at some point in time, it's like, okay, if you bring up a McGonigal and get him as the everyday-ish shortstop, now you've freed up the board a little bit and you can move McKinstry and Baez around to other places, and now you've got more flexibility as a manager, which is really at a premium for Hinch. That's really what he likes to do. You give him more pieces and he goes from regular chess to 3D chess, and then at times it feels like he's playing 4D chess at times in his Tigers managerial career. But you give him those pieces and you give him flexibility, and I think that's why people are clamoring for like a Bregman or somebody that really locks down what has been a weakness here lately. But I'm wondering between McGonigal, Clark, and Briseño, like you said, you've got those three guys. Clark also reinforcing center field is a similar thing to me, because Meadows, I like his possible trajectory, but he's kind of in a similar category to Keith, where they both clearly could be good major leaguers, but it hasn't come together for various reasons, lack of consistency, some defensive issues on Keith's side, and then the fact that Meadows has had a hard time staying healthy has kind of, I think, stunted his development a little bit. But if you can add another outfielder into that rotation that you know is going to cover a lot of ground, that would be a good thing. And then, yeah, Briseño being able to maybe take the mantle on that side on first base, and have Torkelson be able to move into the DH at some points in time, or vice versa. So you do have a lot of potential pieces just from the minor leagues, and I do think that's why they're being hesitant in potentially acquiring anybody from the outside at what would be a larger contract for some of those guys, like a Bregman, after they spent all the money on the pitching side of things.
Yeah, and I think especially when we look beyond this year, that's absolutely the case. I mean, Framber Valdez kind of gives you some insurance for 2027 once presumably Tarek Skubal is gone. And at that point, yeah, the pitching is going to become the focal point again, because they're going to have a hard time, replacing Tarek Skubal, even in the aggregate, as the Moneyball folks will recognize that phrase. So yeah, I mean that's a longer term problem as far as that goes. But for this season, they've got the pitching staff so much dialed, I would say right now, that yeah, I mean you can't help but not look at the offense and have your focus there. And it's just really hard to predict, what's going to happen with Parker Meadows. I mean, we've seen some really good hot streaks from him, but he's always, he's obviously got really long arms. He's got long levers. Guys like that, don't tend to be low strikeout types. And the team as a whole obviously had a lot of strikeouts last year. Even among their better hitters, when you've got Riley Green striking out 30% of the time, Kerry Carpenter and Spencer Torkelson not that much better than that. Those things are fine. You can have your sluggers, you can strike out as long as those guys walk and get on base decently well. But they really needed a contact hitter, one or two, which is where the Bregman thing comes in, because obviously we all saw in the postseason, there were so many circumstances where all they needed was a single. They just needed a couple more balls put in play and couldn't get it done. And that's where McGonigal fits in beautifully. So that's kind of the optimism there, is not just about him, as the player he is, but how he fits into the grander scheme of the offense. He's exactly the type of hitter that they could really use. And Keith can be that kind of hitter too. Keith is a relatively low strikeout guy. He does walk. He does have power. He's just not pulling enough balls in the air, to right field, essentially. There's an article on Bless You Boys right now about that. You can read for the details. But so they have those potential, help coming, in terms of McGonigal and maybe, later on Clark and Briseño. But right now, you've got to look to, Torkelson. Is he going to kind of build on what he did last year, where he finally had sort of a stable season, where there wasn't a huge slump somewhere in the mix? If he can be a little more balanced performer, that would certainly help them. Gleyber Torres was a pretty good force as just a kind of a pure professional hitter for most of the season, and then obviously he suffered with the hernia the whole final 2 months and in the postseason. So you hope he can come back strong. And then you can't really expect Zach McKinstry and Javier Baez to hit a ton for you. Except in kind of like the prime situations. Like, Javier Baez, for some reason, with runners on base, Javier Baez is like a 300 hitter who can't be stopped. But when there's no one on base, he's going to strike out 35% of the time and drive you nuts. So they have these widely varying pieces. And, yeah, it's definitely up to A.J. Hinch, who I think has done a brilliant job with the Tigers to kind of figure out how this all fits together. But it's going to be complicated. Is Wenzel Perez going to play much of a role? We've got Matt Vierling coming back, who is sort of like the right-handed outfielder de jure, really the only one that they have, but he missed basically all last year with shoulder trouble too. So you kind of don't know what to expect. So Yeah, there's definitely a lot of question marks. We saw what they were capable of, from August of 2024 to, July of 2025, and they were very solid. But when the cracks started showing, the whole thing fell apart pretty quickly. So, yeah, I mean, the sooner McGonigal can kind of get here and be that really solid, complete hitter in the middle of everything, the better they'll be in the long haul. And I just, it's just hard to forecast how soon they're gonna push him. He hasn't played that many games. In truth, he's only played maybe 25, 30 games at the AA level. And he tore the place apart, and he tore apart the Arizona Fall League, no problem. And most of us in the prospect hunting ranks are very optimistic that he's basically major league ready, but he might not be ready to hit the ground running and hit 30 home runs and bat 280 for you. We just don't know if he might need a year of kind of settling in. So there's going to be a lot of question marks about that, and you just hope that they've built up the pitching enough to where they don't have to win, with offense alone, and that gives the kids time to kind of develop over the course of the season.
You hit on something that was kind of confounding to me last year to a degree, because they had that hot start. Obviously, they had kind of the cool finish and still were able to put together a decent playoff run, but obviously people were left wanting more, especially after the previous season. But the splits between the first half and the second half were very different, and like the thing that you mentioned with Baez, there were a lot of individual splits for the hitters that didn't necessarily follow a lot of convention, where you go, okay, well, let's see, what can we replicate with Baez, with him being so good with runners on base? It's like, well, you can't do the like you're teaching them in Little League, like, oh, well, just pretend runners are on base, Javi, and then but there are some confusing things, because you're seeing a lot of pieces from a lot of these guys. Obviously, even the better hitters that you're talking about, the Riley Greens of the world, there's some things to clean up. They've talked about the arc of his swing and different things, but they are a primarily pretty young team, and so you got to think there's going to be some improvement there. But baseball is also such a kind of hive mind kind of thing, with the momentum goes together so much that you do want to make sure that you have some of those consistent pieces. That's why I felt like there was maybe a veteran that they would get in the mix, because like you said, Torres, he did have his struggles towards the end of the year because of the injuries, but his presence clearly settled Baez and some of the other folks down, even though Baez is a veteran himself, but he was able to help some of the young guys, some of the guys with plate discipline as a whole. So you would think that maybe a lower cost veteran, or not a big swing veteran, would fit into this team. I don't have anybody identified, but with so many young guys, you could see some sort of consolidation trade, because we talked about the big three at the minor league level, but you follow the minor leagues well. It does feel like there's a little bit of a stockpile that may need to be alleviated at some point. Otherwise, you're going to have some natural attrition from being too overloaded at the minor league level.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make those kind of trades like right now. That's definitely, kind of more of a trade deadline thing. But, I mean, we already saw them, basically have to trade Justin Henry Malloy for cash to the Braves this offseason, who is a guy that, was one of the first moves Scott Harris made, was trading for Justin Henry Malloy, traded Joe Jimenez for him when Joe Jimenez was a pretty good closer caliber reliever. And, Justin Henry Malloy walks a ton, has great patience, but hadn't really figured it out at the major league level. And, after 2 years of that, your value was kind of shot. And you see the same thing with Jace Young. Jace Young has played for the Tigers parts of 2 seasons now, hasn't really been able to hit at all. And he was a guy who was, almost, maybe not quite borderline top 100, but certainly like in that tier below there. And they do have quite a few guys like that who you don't want to see kind of go on that same route, to where, they're just not really worth anything anymore, but they haven't figured it out at the major league level, but they're still only, 25, 26 years old. It's not like their career is necessarily over. And those are guys like Hao-Yu Lee, who plays second base and third base. I think he's 23 now. You've got Max Anderson, who had a really good season last year and got through the AA level, and then, absolutely torched the Arizona Fall League, and he can play second and third. Right-handed hitters both. So there are some guys like that you'd like to see them be able to convert into, one player that they need. I just think that may be something that they have to kind of angle for more toward the deadline. But I agree that there's sort of that stockpile of guys that we would, like in prospecting terms, they'd be called 45s, like 45 future value guys, like future role players, bench players. Like those guys are there to be traded. You might have a few of them come up to help you. You might get a guy like Zach McKinstry, who's sort of a Swiss Army knife that helps you out in all these different ways. But by and large, like if a guy's not going to be an everyday regular for you and you already have a team like the Tigers do where, most positions are filled, either with a platoon or a full-time player, yeah, I mean, you need to start converting those guys into what you need. And if we kind of step back and look a little bit longer, the Tigers offense looks like it's going to be in really good shape for, several more years. Eventually you'll have the Riley Green, contract, question and the Kerry Carpenter contract question. But right now, I mean, it's a solid group, and what they don't have in the minor leagues a whole lot is pitching. They've got a few guys lower down that we're interested in, but that's been a real problem. They've taken a ton of high school draft prospects in the draft the last 3 years, and just about all of them have been hurt, and some of them severely. There's been some Tommy Johns, there's been some shoulder surgeries. So there's a few guys that we're interested in, but that's an area where they're going to have to be stockpiled enough to balance the roster out in the future. As far as this year, I think they're probably wise to sort of, rather than like just getting like a decent veteran player, they kind of have that maybe in Vierling. To a degree, they have that with Baez and McKinstry. They can kind of wait, and I think they can kind of just see how it plays out and see where the real weak point is, and hopefully do a better job adjusting. Scott Harris did not have a very good year last year. I'm not a Scott Harris hater. But he just, by any definition had a pretty brutal year. I think, almost a third of the Tigers payroll was tied up in guys who were worth zero WAR, combined. And then obviously the deadline did not go very well. Kyle Finnegan was a good pickup, but that was basically it for what they got. And then Kyle Finnegan got hurt. So Scott Harris is going to have to do a better job because the baseball season is long. And you have to be able to adjust and season it to taste as you go. And, yeah, I think you're right that those minor league players who aren't really on the cusp of being like star players potentially or even necessarily everyday players are going to have to play a role as far as trading for what they need along the way.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right about the trade deadline. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily pushing for it now, but you can already kind of see it because I think it was in existence a bit last year too, because the reason I saw it was with the whole Jace Young thing, because he was supposed to be maybe a guy to fill a key major league role, and then it seemed okay, maybe he's not necessarily in that particular position. And I'm not giving up on him. It's not about him. It's about the fact that these guys are kind of blocked at the major league level. We see some openings for guys that will make openings for themselves. McGonigal will make an opening no matter what is going on at the major league level. Clark will, when he's ready, will make an opening. Bersenio, some of the top prospects that they have, but these other guys will kind of pool and then languish a little bit. And it's funny because you've kept up the streak of for Tigers interviews. I think on almost every Tigers interview we have had a Hyu Lee name drop. It's very consistent. If you have the bingo card, that's got to be like the center square for us for Tigers interviews. But the funny part is he's been brought up now for the nearly 2 years that we've been covering the Tigers. And like you said, he is getting a little bit older, and it does seem like he has some potential, but that kind of ages out. That potential wanes as you get older. You can't depend on that potential in a trade. So that all that's to say that's a good thing, because when you can kind of take the assessment over the first part of the year and say, okay, what are we looking like? Okay, at the trade deadline, we have these pieces that are maybe a bit duplicative, guys that won't work as well and don't have a good pathway to the big leagues, and we know we need X type of player at the deadline. We've got the pitching staff down. That's looking good. The rotation's looking good. The relievers, the bullpen's looking good. And now we need to add, now we will finally add that bat that everybody's clamoring for.
Yeah, I mean, there were some bats available at the deadline. It didn't really fit the need of like a contact hitter, but Eugenio Suarez didn't cost that much for the Mariners last year. So yeah, I mean, there should be guys like that available. And yeah, I mean, I think if you look at Hyu Lee and Max Anderson, like they both play second base and third base. Neither one is a plus defender. Hyu Lee is more athletic and runs reasonably well, but neither one of them is like a burner. They're basically just like solid right-handed hitters who can play some infield and aren't going to hurt you. And that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot more, and they are very similar in that way. So yeah, I think there's an element this year with the two of both of those players are going to be at AAA, probably swapping back and forth between second and third base. And the Tigers are going to decide to keep one of them. It's a very left-handed lineup that the Tigers have, and you look at Clark, Briseño, and McGonigal, they're all left-handed hitters. Obviously, that's a good thing. You want to be more left-handed heavy, but, you still want a right-handed hitter somewhere in there who matches some lefties and that you can move around the infield. And one of those guys is going to win that role, and the other one probably does need to be traded for what they need.
Indeed, and I think there's some interesting moves to be made here as we go on. But appreciate the preview and great stuff. We'll look forward to having you back on as the season gets rolling here. But make sure to tell people where they can follow all the great coverage here.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, you can find everything over at blessyouboys.com. We have a really active comment section you can hang out in. A lot of smart folks talking baseball there. And, yep, there's new articles up every day. Thanks a lot for having me. Definitely.
We'll have you back on soon and appreciate you coming on. And, yeah, be sure to follow Bless You Boys. That's where I get a lot of my information for the show. So great stuff, Brandon, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, brother.
All right. Thanks. Thanks to Brandon Day and the rest of our guests. We're going to finally come back in studio with Dan here. He's been trying to avoid me all show. He's been drinking all sorts of hydrating fluids over here because I get to watch what the producers consume. And so hopefully he's pumped up for the last two segments because we'll have two quick ones here. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back in here in studio with Dan here. We've had some good conversations, but he's been a good producer. He's trying to get me to focus on the guest at hand because I was trying to talk to him when Elaine was here, and he was like, "Why are you talking to me about bananas when Elaine was here in studio and gave us some great Griffins coverage?"
Well, yeah, that was fine, but I feel like the two times you tried to throw to me, like it was just so off topic of the guest who was here that they would have been like, "Are these guys drinking? Why are they not talking to me about hockey or basketball?" But no, I have no problem running my mouth. It's just at that point it felt more appropriate.
Well, now we have a little bit of time at the end. We have a few business things to take care of to circle back around to our conversations because we have our possible mission that we're going to go on. We got to figure that out. Also, I've been intrigued by us building out this Jethro cinematic universe too, because we've got two shows together this week, and Shane, unfortunately, will not be in studio with us on Thursday. So it'll just be the two of us again, and we can continue to build out this lineup.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a cinematic universe because I thought we compared Big G to Dan Skipper and I forget who the other one was. It was a coaching staff. We were like basically a Lions coaching staff.
It just sounds better when I say cinematic. I don't know what to call it. The Jethro Detroit Lions coaching crossover. See, I don't have a snappy phrase for that.
But yeah, because I would love to come up with a comparison for Steve. He's a character in himself. He might just be Steve. So
well, that's one of the things, and this is not homework for now. This is just kind of helping to build us out. I don't know, who are the coaches, and then who are the players? Like, are the guests the players, and then we get to pick different guests, and then have them. We'll have like a Jahmyr Gibbs, and we'll have a Montgomery, and then everybody in the Jethro side of things are all coaches.
Yeah,
which would make your dad Dan Campbell, right? That would make Scott.
He's almost got the look down. He doesn't have as much hair as Dan Campbell, but he's got the goatee and
good leader. And he's building a good culture. Yeah. He might be listening to us, so I have to say nice things about him
for the details.
Yeah, he's been giving me notes, being a good leader.
Positioning good.
Yeah, well, I think that's been good, but we got to hype up the guests more. And we do have to do that. That's a good note, and we do circle back around to him at the end of the show, which is a good time to do that because Brandon Day and Robbie Bettelon and Elaine Shircliff are always great, and they were great this time. But I got to mention it more during the segment.
Oh, okay.
That's a good note. That's a good note because
more sense,
I'm not resetting the segment. But now we're just doing on air production here. We don't have to do that. But I want it. So he would be Campbell. So then the rest of the coaches would be people at Jethro, like all, and then we'd have the players be.
Mr. Anonymous. He kind of feels more like a Rod Wood role in my eyes. I mean,
okay,
but he does get he does get in the trenches. So I don't know.
And your dad is giving me live updates. He would prefer to be AJ Hinch. He wants us to do this crossover to the baseball.
He can be AJ Hinch
universe here, and then I don't know what to do with that.
Well, that'd be fine. I mean, he can be AJ Hinch. You kind of strike me as an Alan Trammell type.
Okay, I mean that's interesting.
Yeah,
I like that. I like when you say what we all are. That's kind of how I like to do it.
That works for me. Big G can be special advisor to Scott Harris, Miguel Cabrera.
Yes, that's a good. I like that comparison. Yeah,
so we got AJ Hinch. Yeah, I mean Jim Leland. Someone in here is Jim Leland.
Oh yeah,
Conrad, I don't know.
Oh, that's a good one. He's kind of got like a likable personality. He's not as grumpy though. He's not like as grumpy off the cuff as Leland is.
No, but his off the cuff grumpiness was so charming.
Oh, it is.
Ways. Like
and Dave is charming, but he doesn't necessarily come off as grumpy though. We don't have like the grumpiness on the shell.
Yeah, and I need to know. Like, I mean, I've never heard Aaron talk on air or and I don't listen to Jeff enough. He sounds good every time I have heard him, but Jeff is pretty smooth. Jeff might be Scott Harris. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
There's just the whole he says a lot without saying anything. I don't know, I'm comparing Jeff, but Scott Harris never gets caught saying the wrong thing. I always put my foot in my mouth. But we should probably take a commercial break here because I think we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, we're due for one, but this is a good conversation. We'll be continuing it here. But yeah, we'll take a quick break and hit said guests as well as the sponsors and preview the Jethro lineup here for the week. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy you could join us on Banana Bread Day. We did talk some banana bread, and we had some great talks with Elaine Shircliff, Robbie Bettelon, and Brandon Day. We appreciate them joining us. Appreciate the support of all of our sponsors: Collectible Insurance Services, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Rydan Investments, Encore Business Group, Jim Hegland of JH Realty, Williams Chiropractic, iCore, and the West Michigan Sports Commission. Appreciate all of their help here on the show. Appreciate Dan's help on the show. I like this concept, but now we might have to do multiple sports. I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah, I mean, we could go so many different. And like I said, I wish I knew more about the coaches in hockey. Like, I can't even think of who's the Wings coach? Is it McClellan?
It's McClellan, and then somebody's got to be Trent Yawney. That's their main assistant coach. He always wears. We did this research during a Big G show. I think it's called a driver's cap.
Oh, really?
And Big G has one, and so I've told him I want him to wear it in studio. He has not done that for me yet.
Yeah, that's tough. And I mean, like, you got others. Your mom's here almost every show, and then Rex is somehow involved somewhere.
Yeah, he's rappelling from a rooftop somewhere. Yep.
The whole thing is just, I have to come in more focused on this. When you said cinematic universe, I thought we were going to have like the Iron Man of this show.
Well, see, that's an idea too. See, we've got a lot of different paths to go down. So that's why, this will be just kind of a thread to return to when we have our little talks at the beginning and end of the show, or maybe in between. So I like this as a concept, though.
I mean, we could have done a deep dive on banana bread.
That's true. We did cover that a decent amount, but be sure to tune into the rest of the said Jethro cinematic universe. We've got the Sports Project Wednesday. You'll be hearing a guest host on there. You'll be hearing me again. So tune in to hear the Sports Project. But me, I don't know if you want to hear me again. But then Thursday we've got Extra Points. Shane Graham's Extra Points. Dan will be on that one again. Be sure to tune in to Jeff Isaac Saturday nights for the All Request Show, the Polka Pops, where Mike Baruta's on there and the other folks, and then obviously Conrad and Rowdy during the day. So thanks for tuning in, and stay informed and stay vigilant.